In the heart of Africa, a continent teeming with life and rich in resources, a dark shadow lurks. This is the shadow of corruption, a pervasive evil that has plagued African nations for far too long. It is a story of betrayal, where those entrusted with power have chosen personal gain over the welfare of their people, leaving behind a trail of shattered dreams and broken promises. From the highest offices of government to the humblest village, the stench of corruption permeates every facet of life. It is a story that has been told and retold, a cycle of greed and impunity that seems to have no end. But behind the headlines and the statistics lie real lives, ordinary people whose hopes and aspirations have been crushed under the weight of this insidious scourge. This is not just an African story, it is a human story. It is a tale of power unchecked, of greed run rampant, and of the devastating consequences for those who are robbed of their future. It is a story that demands to be told not with despair, but with a sense of urgency, a call to action for a continent yearning for change. The roots of corruption in Africa run deep, entwined with the continent's turbulent history. The colonial era, with its extractive policies and disregard for local governance structures, laid the foundation for a system where power and wealth were concentrated in the hands of a few. This legacy of exploitation created a culture of impunity, where those in power operated above the law. Post-independence, many African nations found themselves grappling with the challenges of building new nations from the ashes of colonialism. Weak institutions, coupled with ethnic tensions and economic instability, created fertile ground for corruption to flourish. Leaders, often driven by personal ambition or a desire to consolidate power, resorted to patronage networks and the abuse of state resources to maintain their grip. This legacy of greed and impunity has continued to cast a long shadow over the continent. Despite efforts to promote good governance and transparency, corruption remains a significant obstacle to development, undermining democracy, eroding trust in institutions, and perpetuating cycles of poverty and inequality. The fight against corruption is not just about punishing the guilty, it is about breaking this vicious cycle and building a future where all Africans have the opportunity to thrive. Across the continent, the tentacles of corruption reach far and wide, infecting every sector of society. From grand corruption, where high-ranking officials siphon off millions of dollars in public funds, to petty corruption, where ordinary citizens are forced to pay bribes for basic services, the impact is devastating. One of the most insidious forms of corruption is the plundering of natural resources. Africa, endowed with vast mineral wealth, has often fallen victim to the resource curse, where corrupt officials collude with multinational corporations to exploit these resources for personal gain, leaving the environment devastated and communities impoverished. This culture of impunity has a corrosive effect on society, eroding trust in government and undermining the rule of law. It creates a climate of fear and silence where speaking out against corruption can have dangerous consequences. This silence only serves to embolden the corrupt, allowing them to operate with impunity and further entrench their grip on power. Behind the statistics and the headlines lie the human faces of corruption. They are the farmers whose land has been stolen, the mothers who cannot afford healthcare for their children, the students whose dreams of education have been dashed. Consider the story of Amina, a young mother living in a slum outside Nairobi. Amina works tirelessly as a street vendor, barely scraping by to feed her 2 children. Every day she faces the indignity of having to pay bribes to corrupt officials just to operate her small stall. The money she loses to these bribes could be used to send her children to school, to buy them new clothes, to provide them with a better life. Amina's story is not unique. It is the story of millions of Africans who are trapped in a cycle of poverty and despair, their lives held hostage by a system that is rigged against them. They are the true victims of corruption, their voices often unheard, their stories untold. The consequences of unchecked corruption are far-reaching. Undermining the very fabric of society, it erodes trust in government, fuels instability, and hinders economic growth. When citizens lose faith in their leaders and institutions, it creates a dangerous vacuum that can be exploited by extremist groups and criminal networks. Corruption acts as a tax on development, diverting resources away from essential services such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. This lack of investment perpetuates cycles of poverty and inequality, trapping millions in a vicious cycle of deprivation. It also discourages foreign investment as businesses are wary of operating in countries where corruption is rampant. The fight against corruption is not just about promoting good governance. It is about ensuring peace, stability, and prosperity for all Africans. It is about creating a future where every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential, unhindered by the scourge of corruption. The fight against corruption cannot be won in isolation. It requires a concerted global effort to address the transnational nature of corruption, where illicit financial flows, money laundering, and tax evasion often cross borders with impunity. Developed countries have a responsibility to address the role they play in perpetuating corruption in Africa. This includes cracking down on multinational corporations that engage in bribery and tax evasion, as well as addressing the flow of illicit funds into their financial systems. International organizations such as the United Nations and the African Union also have a critical role to play in supporting anti-corruption efforts in Africa. This includes providing technical assistance, promoting good governance practices, and holding corrupt officials accountable. Despite the challenges, there is hope. Across Africa, a new generation of leaders, activists, and citizens are rising up, demanding accountability and transparency. They are using technology, social media, and the power of collective action to expose corruption and hold those in power to account. From the streets of Dakar to the townships of Johannesburg, citizens are organizing protests, demanding an end to impunity and calling for a new era of transparency and accountability. Investigative journalists are playing a critical role in uncovering corruption, often at great personal risk. These courageous individuals and organizations are shining a light on the dark corners of corruption, inspiring others to raise their voices and demand change. They are the seeds of a new Africa, one where corruption is no longer tolerated and where the rule of law prevails. The fight against corruption is not just the responsibility of governments and international organizations. It is a fight that belongs to all Africans. Citizens have a critical role to play in demanding accountability, holding their leaders to higher standards, and creating a culture of integrity. Education is key. By teaching young people about the importance of integrity, transparency, and accountability, we can help break the cycle of corruption. Empowering citizens with the knowledge and tools to hold their leaders accountable is essential for building strong and resilient democracies. The media also has a crucial role to play in holding power to account. By shining a light on corruption, exposing wrongdoing, and providing a platform for diverse voices, the media can help create a climate of transparency and accountability. The journey towards a corruption-free Africa will be long and arduous, but it is a journey that must be taken. It will require sustained effort, unwavering commitment, and the collective will of all segments of society. There are no quick fixes or easy solutions. It will require comprehensive reforms that address the root causes of corruption, strengthen institutions, promote good governance, and empower citizens. It will also require a change in mindset, a shift away from a culture of impunity towards a culture of accountability. The international community must also play its part by supporting African-led initiatives, strengthening global governance mechanisms, and holding those who facilitate and benefit from corruption accountable. The fight against corruption is not just about punishing the guilty, it is about reclaiming the promise of Africa, a continent brimming with potential. It is about creating a future where every African has the opportunity to thrive, where resources are used for the benefit of all and where the rule of law prevails. It is a fight for the soul of Africa, a fight that must be won. The stakes are high, but so too is the potential reward. A brighter future for Africa and its people. The time for action is now. Please like and subscribe to see more videos like this.